Hey there. If you're a frequent listener to our show, you already know that our show is brought to you by our friends over at Artillery Sports. But what you may not know is that Artillery Sports helps athletes of all types win on and off the course and court. They do this by selling quality, durable, and precision manufactured sports equipment that keeps you in the game, while also using a portion of the profits to provide the funding needed to care for our nation's veterans. With Artillery Sports, it's more than just a game. So head over to artillerysports.com today to buy the quality equipment you need to keep you in the game and to help our nation's veterans at the same time. That's artillerysports.com. Make sure you head on over there today. Oh, and use the code DOCFIRST to get 10% off your first order. Welcome to Documentary First, an inside look at documentary filmmaking. I'm your host, Christian Taylor, and a documentary filmmaker. Today, I'm joined by two of my partners in crime, David Paterson and Todd Anderson. We are here for more of discussion of our theatrical release, our limited theatrical release of The Girl Who Wore Freedom. Todd and David, thank you so much for coming back. This is our data analysis podcast. This is kind of where we tell the numbers of what we've learned or what the numbers tell us. We were hoping to have Josh Taylor, my youngest son here, who actually did the data analysis for us. But it's his first day of college today, and he really needed to focus on that. So, Josh, we do miss you. We thank you for all the data work that you did do. I will say, and hopefully you guys agree with me, that the data analysis was very instructive. I think we learned a lot from looking at that data. And let's talk about what data Josh looked at. Todd, you're there looking at the sheet. Tell us what all of the things that we looked at.
Well, he had taken a look at how sales went in different regions with different companies. Looked at it by state. Looked at it by day the show was screened, what times of the day, and where it was more successful, where it wasn't as successful, and then some limitations we ran into regarding overall profits, where we had delivered DCP files and hard drives that cost a bit to ship around.
Yeah. Now, if you're just joining us and you haven't listened to our previous two podcasts, you might want to go back and listen to the first two podcasts that David, Todd, and I did on our limited theatrical release for The Girl Who Wore Freedom. This film was done a few years ago, so this really is something new that we have done. We did it with our team, thanks to the heading of David Paterson, who said, this is going to be our year. We are going to get this film out there to people through the theater. So hats off to David for spearheading this, this event. And we just kind of pulled up our bootstraps and made this happen. And, David, why don't you tell us, how many states, how many theaters, how many screenings, just so that we can remind people how big of a thing that we did.
Yeah, well, we ended up doing 111 different theaters throughout the U.S. Was 112, but one theater couldn't get their act together with what was called the deliverable, and they weren't able to correctly download it, so they wanted us to spend $1 million to send it overnight. And we still didn't trust that they would do it correctly, and we didn't want to lose money on that. So it ended up being 111 sites in over 100 states, over 100 cities, and it was 330 some screenings total. So some theaters only did it for the day of D-Day and the day before. Others did it for a longer period of time. The vast majority, I would say, did anywhere from 3 to 4 performances total, meaning an afternoon and an evening on 2 different days. One theater went for an entire week. Another theater went for 9 days. Again, you would say, oh, you make that much, a lot more money with that many performances. Well, our studies show that's not necessarily the case, especially with documentaries, because no movie stars in documentaries. So You know, sometimes if it gets people's attention in a city and they go, "Oh, there's only 2 days of showing," well, we got to catch it. So it was interesting in some cities where we had 4 performances, we made a lot more money than cities that had 12 performances. So,
Yeah, and there, we had some bigger chains that had a lot more screens inside of their, theaters that ran it on a bunch of different screens. And then we had, some that weren't chains that really only had one or two screens. And I mean, so many differences across these different states and different theaters with how they handled the film. So it was interesting to see uh, what happened, during the various times. Like we thought that matinees would probably be our strongest attendance, but that did not end up being the case,
the
right?
reason for that is a lot of people who appreciate documentaries tend to be an older generation, generally in their 30s or higher. And in many cases, when you're talking about World War II or older historical events, you figure it's more like retirees that are going to be going to it. Now, retirees don't want to go to a 8 o'clock show, so they prefer to go see a matinee. And they also hate loud kids in the theater, so they know if they go to a noon or 1 matinee, it's not going to be any loud kids. So that was part of our gamble, which did not pay off. It was also a forced gamble in certain respects because some of the larger theater chains were like, this is summer blockbuster time. We're not going to push we're not going to push a Marvel out of a theater for a night for your show. So it was a compromise. We went, well, what about a matinee? Matinee will work for you guys, and because that's our target audience. But that didn't always pay off that way. It
Yeah,
did
it
get us in the
seemed
theater.
right. It seemed that the times that people showed up the most were 3 p.m., 6:30, or 7. And that was pretty much across the board,
Yep.
which we thought was interesting, right, Todd?
Yeah, the noon and 1 o'clock did not do very well. But yeah, by 3:30 there was a large group there, and then um, uh, 6 o'clock, and then just after dinner, 7:30 ish, roughly. Those seemed to be the best times. I was surprised it wasn't as evenly distributed or sort of equal across the board. It certainly was at those specific times, and surprising that the noon or 1 time frame wasn't all that great.
Yeah, and when we were talking about what we were going to talk about on this podcast, David mentioned that, we just should talk about our naivete in this area because we did step into this not knowing a lot and knowing that we would figure things out as we go along about what we were going to talk on this podcast before we began. And we talked about just talking about our naivete when we got into this because there was a lot we really didn't know and we knew we were going to learn along the way. And one of those things was, we knew we really didn't know when people were going to go or what movie theaters were going to be popular. We didn't know if they were going to advertise for our film or if they were going to rely on us to do it. Now, I think the answer to that, you guys might agree with me, is that they really did nothing on our behalf to advertise for us unless there was somebody on the inside that really had a vested interest in our film. Yeah.
I
Yeah,
think
I
in the
think that's
case where
one.
there was an actual event, or they had members already involved in seeing some of their special events and seeing some of their special screenings. In other cases where we were just another film, across another 16 or so, then we probably didn't stand out and didn't have as good a showing or as
And
big of an audience.
and in that same respect, we took it personally. We were hurt, that these guys seemed to be not paying attention. But what we've learned is it's exactly how it works in the business. The theaters, for the most part, don't care. It's a win-win situation for them. Doesn't cost them anything. We have to send them the film. We have to pay to get the film back. They don't have to sell a single ticket. The theater can sit empty. They're still not losing money because they're a multiplex. So their people are working to get popcorn for people in other theaters, and they're not going to do any advertising. And they don't even let people know when it is up until like 4 days before it happens. Now, I just recently went to go see a movie in my town for Deadpool, and the theater did not post the times till 3 days before. So it's not like they were just taking us out. It's just the way it seems to work. They're like, all right, we'll get around to posting the times when we want. We said we're running the thing. And so maybe for Deadpool or the Marvel things, that does not bother people as much as when we have a very limited run. We want people to know exactly when it is so they can get together with their family or friends to do it. And again, the theaters just don't care. And we were talking about deliverables earlier. What do these big chains do the exact same way? Well, that's part of the thing that we did learn. They don't all do. A lot of the bigger ones now have these digital cloud downloads that there is no mailing of things. And obviously, if it doesn't get downloaded correctly the first time, then it does. Again, we were working with middle of the road theaters. We were not working with the huge chains that use these huge downloadable things. These theaters, some were still using DVDs.
Yeah.
And others were using the older equipment, which we had to ship. So this, if you walk away from any of these podcasts, I want to be clear. Once your movie is made, don't think you don't need any money to do anything else.
Right.
Because deliverables, let's put it this way, for every movie that's not made, there are 1,000 that never get seen.
Yeah.
Because you need money to get that movie to certain places.
Yeah.
And that's what deliverables are. It's taking your movie, making it into many, many small movies, digital cassettes, to get to the theaters to show them. And of course, that does not include any type of advertising that you want. The advertising will be up to you. But most importantly, when we decided to start doing this, we were very excited. We're like, 100 different cities. Okay, we're going to make a huge amount of money. Now, we made money. So
We did.
it wasn't
I want to
worthwhile
make that
doing it.
clear. We did
But
make money on this deal.
however, we did not know how much the deliverable demand was going to cut into our profit. We just didn't know it. And when we first started doing this, we were like, okay, we'll be excited if we get like 20 or 30 screenings. And when we got up to 50 or so screenings, we were still excited. The only one that really started doing the numbers in our head was Christian. She's going, you do realize we have to have a drive, we have to ship a drive, we have to get the drive back. And then we don't have 100 drives, so we're going to have to wait to get it back. And that's where things got a little bit more complicated.
Yeah.
Because again, go ahead.
Yeah. I mean, I knew because I had done this before through the film festival run, I knew that we were going to run into problems. And the biggest problems are that when you are dealing with physical drives, there are so many links in the chain that can falter and that can cause problems. And so it starts from the very, very beginning. You have to have your film made in, you have a physical film, you export it from Premiere. When you export it from Premiere, you have to send it to someone or you have to make a DCP, and then you have to put it on either a physical drive or upload it somewhere for someone to download it. In all of that, things can happen, mistakes can happen. So when it finally gets on a drive or someone downloads it, it has to be checked. And so there can be a mistake in that. And then that process needs to be repeated. And then when that drive gets sent, does it get lost? Does it get there? Does it end up with the right label? Then does it get ingested in the machine in time? And when it gets ingested, does it play correctly? If it doesn't, is there time for another drive to be sent? And, is when you're dealing with all of this, you're dealing with humans that don't really care. They're just getting paid a minimum wage to work at a theater or to ship your thing, and they're just doing their job. And so they make mistakes from time to time. So there's all this.
Not just mistakes. Todd would reach out and they go, hey, did Bert, ingest the price? Like, oh, no, Bert, he went to a wedding. He'll be back on Wednesday. And then I'll send it. And
Well,
then, another one is like, there was successful investment. Oh, Delilah, I think she had a fight with her husband. I think she's now living in another state. We'll look into it. I mean, it was all types of excuses to not ingest it as soon as they got it and not return it as soon as they did it
yeah.
and check it. They're always it was we were at their victims of their timeline.
Yeah, the hard drives certainly introduced the most amount of risk as to whether or not it was ever going to happen at some of those theaters. Um, but it also introduced a lot of cost also, and was certainly was certainly a big part of that formula. And so I think we've said it before, the lesson learned, and I think it showed in the data that was taking a closer look at, was that we need to be able to manage the hard drives a little differently. Maybe get the theaters to pay for some of the cost, or just explain to them that we need to do it without the hard drives, and we need to figure out how to download.
Yeah, and I think another mistake we made is we did deal with one DCP supplier, he would made our DCP file and then he would put it on drives and he would send it out for us. He's a great guy. He has done all my work, but he's just one guy. He's a one-man shop and it's not his full-time job. He does other things. And so we were relying on him to do this huge distribution for us, and he only had like 5 drives. So, and we thought that, okay, well, we could do all this in advance and we would have plenty of time. And we would have. However, the theaters weren't even confirming until it got closer and closer and closer. And so we couldn't send the drives out in advance. And so then everything got backed up. And so we had to have more drives. So we ended up having to buy $1,600 worth of drives. And so then we would have enough to send out to meet the demand. I think if we had to do it all over again, there is a service that we learned about in this process called Deluxe, where you do have to pay $3,000 and they have your file, and then they are the ones that distribute it for you, either through a satellite link or a download or a DCP or however. And a lot of theaters are used to dealing with Deluxe as opposed to an individual situation like us. And I think Todd probably will vouch for me. I mean, Todd has this enormous spreadsheet that he spent all of this time tracking emails and tracking numbers from UPS and phone calls and addresses. And what else, Todd, is on your sheet?
Oh, we have a lot of information there, but yeah, certainly as far as tracking the drives, we had to sort of map out where they needed to go, and when we expected to get them back so that we could turn them around and ship them out to the next place. And getting them back was difficult. And a lot of these theaters don't expect to return them until after they're done showing the film. They expect that these hard drives are something they can hold on to as a backup during the dates when they're showing it. And that didn't necessarily work into our plans. So in most cases, we were able to ship it out, get them to download it, send it back to us, and we got all of that done. But it was it was a little slow, and it was a little disconcerting when we were running out of time.
Yeah, and it was
Yeah,
very
I guess.
stressful.
Yeah, and I think part of that is I'm Scottish and I'm greedy. I mean, I think we should have at some point established a stop line but we kept adding theaters. We're like, okay, they want it. Okay, let's figure out how to do it. And I think that added the stress to it. I mean, like I said, we did 111 cities. Well, we could have stopped at 90 cities, right? And maybe made the same amount of money, considering of the DCP drives that we sent out to other places and stuff like that.
I think we were
So,
really hopeful, though. I think we thought, okay, well, we add more theaters. Even if 5 people show up, that's 5 more people that are buying
right.
tickets.
Yeah.
And so there will be at least more money coming in. But I don't think we were doing our numbers right, because then you're not thinking about the $100 that it takes to, ship that DVD out, and only 5 tickets for, who knows, they may be only charging $4. for a fee. That's the other thing. We had no idea what the theaters were going to be charging for their tickets, and it varied widely from theater to theater, you
Widely. We
know?
were as high as almost $13 to as low as $4. And
Right.
so that's a sizable difference, you know? And
Yeah.
we were discussing at another point that the one theater that combined was a lot of performances, they were the $4 ticket guys. So, you know, there were theaters that showed it a third of the time or even a quarter of the time that made more money because the ticket price was higher and it was a very tight, concise, limited run of a couple days where people sort of went in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We felt we could more than break even at all of those places. Unfortunately, at some of the places where we were shipping hard drives and spending more money, we didn't quite make break even on some of those.
Yeah, I
So
think Josh found out how many did we break even in terms of or did we do a profit for the ones where we sent DCPs? He did find out, I think. But there were definitely a bunch of theaters where we lost money sending the
Yes.
DCPs, for
Yeah.
sure. And I
Yeah.
think that was very disappointing.
Yeah.
I think the bonus that we learned was that there are some film, like I do think that our film festival friends are the ones that really did well because they cared about showing a film to their film festival members, and that did very well. It's not just a regular theater. They do already have a mailing list. They care about getting people out there. So I thought that was a good, a good group to send the film to. Also, we had people that wanted the film, people that at museums or that did special screenings that advocated for the film and advertised for the film, and those did great, and they paid up front typically. And so we did learn that if we do screenings in the future, that's probably the best way to do it. I really am surprised that anybody came to the film, given the fact that most theaters did not advertise anything. It's really remarkable. I think in West Virginia, Josh said that our best screening attendance, like for one screening, was 26 people in West Virginia in just a regular theater. Um, that's remarkable. I don't know why that was, but I think the other thing that we found out is that, David, you did so much work trying to find in the town so many people to reach out to. So we did do our own outreach, like a lot. We sent
Yeah.
thousands and thousands of emails in these 111 cities, right? Talk about that.
Well, that was it. We tried to target anyone who would want to go see this, basically. And that was, since it was a movie about, D-Day, we went to the local governments and we tried to guilt them into promoting it because we're like, you have veterans in your community. A lot of them, we were able to track down how many World War II veterans were. And we said, it would be great for you guys to acknowledge the film, acknowledge that this theater is working with us to honor local veterans. And I mean, we sent it out, and I think we talked about this a little bit on some of the other podcasts. We went after the Chamber of Commerce. We went after the local VA facilities or VFWs. One thing we did learn is the VFWs and American Legions, they're a little behind the times, so most of them did not have emails. If we were to do it again, we should have just called them. I know it would have been a lot of phone
Yeah.
calls, but I'm sure they still check answering machines at these places where even when we had existing emails, I don't think they even looked at them. Because I think we would have had a better turnout if we for sure reached out to veterans administrations and were aware of the film. I think most fell on deaf ears.
Yeah.
And in West Virginia, we could have called a VFW. I mean, we didn't really look into exactly the emails that went specific to that theater. I think we should go back and look at that and see if we had gotten a response from the government or the VFW or American Legion or something like that. Because clearly, in that town, that theater, people knew about it
Yeah.
one way or another. Those 27 people didn't say, hey, let's go to the movies tonight and go see The Girl Who Wore Freedom, because I was
Right.
just thinking about it.
Right.
Clearly, there had been some communications in that town to make that happen. And we did that. However it happened, we
Yeah.
did it. Because I guarantee you, the theater did not take out a billboard to say, The Girl Who Wore Freedom, everyone needs to come see this.
Right.
So,
And I think that if we had had more time to even do more outreach, whether it was on social media or whether it was making phone calls, we could have done even better. But that really wasn't on us, because the theaters wouldn't tell us till the very last minute when the shows were going to play. So we couldn't really tell anyone when the show was going to play, or if
right.
it. And so it wasn't possible for us to advertise things until the very last minute. So I think that that was another challenge for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. The sum total of what we learned is what? Todd, you go first.
Well, the data analysis was great because I think it corroborated some of the thoughts we already had in the areas in the places where there was a little less vested interest, and we were shipping hard drives. Difficult to make any money. So I think that'd be the biggest lesson learned. And just like any other sale, the relationship is big, and so I think where we could find locations and theaters and museums and other places where they this message is easily heard, and they've got an audience for it. I think you've got a chance at bringing right folks in, but somehow you've got to get the word out beforehand, because just putting it in a theater isn't going to get the word out on its own typically.
Yeah.
And just
all right,
going back
David.
to
Last word from you.
Going back to what Christian mentioned about like that company where you can pay them $3,000. Well, you as the filmmaker, are you going to get $3,000 plus worth of monies from all these theaters? We were extremely lucky to get in as many theaters as we did. I'm not going to say every filmmaker is going to be that lucky. If you have an independent film, even if you have one or two known talents, you still have an uphill climb in a lot of respects. We took advantage of D-Day. Our movie was about D-Day. So any filmmaker who wants to take the same route, research. You're not. You can't just call a theater and say, I got a great movie. Let's do a 50-50 split. That was pretty crazy for us to even go in that way. But we were able to go after a specific theater with specific bragging elements to it and a twist. We said there's an audience out there. So if you're going to be going after a theater, you have to tell them that there's an audience in town and who that audience is.
And why your film is relevant to that audience.
To that audience. And of course, if you ever say, and we have boots on the ground in that town to get butts in the seats, that will always interest the theater owner.
Yeah. Well, my lesson is this. And I'm going to give a clear example of this. So this past Saturday, when we're recording, today is Wednesday, August 21st. Last Saturday, on August 17th, there is a group called the Camp House MVPA in Galveston, Texas. This group is a group of people that they're Motor Vehicle Preservation Association members. They care about World War II vehicles and preserving them to teach others about history. They saw The Girl Who Wore Freedom in Branson, Missouri a couple of years ago and thought this would be amazing to use at one of our events. And they've decided to book our film for an in-person event on October 18th. They have a huge, gigantic convoy of military vehicles coming from Canada, driving all the way down to New Orleans. And they are stopping in Galveston, Texas for the weekend to relax and enjoy the weekend at this old military base in Galveston, Texas. And our film is opening the event. Well, they decided to use our film on August 17th to advertise this event in October. And they did 3 showings at their big D-Max theater in Galveston on this Saturday. And they have been advertising it for 2 months everywhere. Posters everywhere, on the radio, local television stations, just getting the word out at VAs, just everywhere they could. This tiny little, association has been doing that. And then they partnered with this theater that they knew well, who gave up these screens for these 3 screenings to get out the word. And they brought military vehicles on Saturday, and they put those outside. They decorated everything, like World War II. And at the end of the day, they had me record a video to put, before the theater, welcoming everybody and encouraging them to come in October and see the film again. And I sent in things to give away for prizes. And at the end of the day, they called me so excited and so thrilled because our film did better that day than Deadpool or Twister. And that is because these people cared so much about spreading their word and, getting people to see the film that they worked so hard to get people there. And that's all it took. And they said that when people were leaving, they were leaving, wiping tears out of their eyes, saying, "Oh my goodness, I have to come see this again. So-and-so needs to see this," and sharing stories of why they were so glad they came. And that's it. The in-person screenings with people that really care are the ones that make the difference. And this theater agreed to split 50-50 with us, just like anywhere else. And we will do the best in this theater that we've done in any of the others because of this, invested group of people. So going forward, if we do these events again, if we do this sort of thing with theaters, it's got to be with a group like that really cares on the inside and cares about the film as much as we do. So that's my takeaway. All right.
Let's see if we get Hugh Jackman in our next one, though.
Absolutely. Maybe he'll narrate Heroes of Carenton for us. That would be amazing. All right, guys. Well, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate all of your help on this. It's been a really educational adventure. I've loved working with you. It's been really fun, and I have loved what we have learned, even though it's been challenging along the way. It's been great. So everybody, thank you so much for listening to Documentary First. We really appreciate your support. I hope you have learned something along the way. Please keep listening, comment, give us reviews if you can. That would be amazing. We really appreciate your support. All right, you've been listening to Documentary First, where we believe everybody has a story to tell, and you can be the one to tell it. Bye, everybody.